with the third step prayer.
Which can be found on page 63 of your big book. Hope everybody's got a big book, a highlighter, and an open mind. Third step prayer. And by the way, my name is Rob K, and I'm a recovered alcoholic. God, I offer myself to thee, to build with me and do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. I do thy will always.
Thank you, Rob. All right. As Rob was saying earlier, and I'm not sure if everybody heard, but we are on page 114, but we're going to back up a paragraph, and we'll start at the bottom of page 113.
You got it, Mr. Leo. You would suppose that men in the fourth classification would be quite hopeless. But that is not so. Many of Alcoholics Anonymous were like that. Everybody had given them up. Defeat seemed certain, yet often such men had spectacular and powerful recoveries.
Yeah, I think just as I'm making another point here on this, that all is not lost. It's sometimes when they hit that very bottom, that rock bottom, that they find themselves at the point where they are at their most likely to recover. And I say that with the fact that, it says here everybody had given them up. Well, it's not. It is not as much as giving them up. They've turned their backs on them. They've distanced themselves from them. They have protected themselves from them. It runs the gamut of people that have turned away and said enough is enough. I've had it. There's nothing else that can be done. It's a lost cause, and relationships obviously they're broken, and so on and so forth. There, so it is at this point that there are spectacular, as they say, and powerful recoveries. We've seen it time and again, especially given that Bill and Dr. Bob were pretty far gone, I would say, and in that they've been to their hospitals several times and finally recovered. Bob?
Yeah, I just want to double back just a little bit. We're talking about the four classifications of the alcoholic that they mentioned in this book. The type 1 is a heavy drinker. Type 2, lack of control. Type 3, wants to stop but cannot. Type 4, medical problems. And the one that they don't mention is type 5, who is dead. They don't mention that. I was just in a meeting of writing the big book. Now, writing the big book is a book that they go through, Bill's writing, but they go through the GSO archives and anywhere else they can find documents that explain, why Bill was doing this and why Bill was doing that. And today they happen to be doing To the Wives. So I gleaned a little bit of more information. In page 110 to 113, which we just finished, they talk about the four types. Again, type 1, who is the heavy drinker, is positive he can handle his liquor. Type 2, which is lack of control, tells you he wants to stop. Type 3 desperately wants to stop, but can't. And then type 4 has given up all hope of ever quitting. He is the one who drinks on the way home from the hospital. So I just wanted to bring those out so that, because we're talking about that, and so just we go back a little bit to stay so that it's fresh in our mind. There are exceptions. We're at the top of page 114, everybody. There are exceptions. Some men have been so impaired by alcohol that they cannot stop. Sometimes there are cases where alcoholism is complicated by other disorders. A good doctor or psychiatrist can tell you whether these complications are serious. In any event, try to have your husband read this book. His reaction may be one of enthusiasm. If he is already committed to an institution, but can convince you and your doctor that he means business, give him a chance to try our method. Unless the doctor thinks his mental condition too abnormal or dangerous, we make this recommendation with some confidence. For years, we have been working with alcoholics committed to institutions. Since this book was first published, AA has released thousands of alcoholics from asylums and hospitals of every kind. The majority have never returned. The power of God goes deep.
Yeah, and if you remember back in the 30s, that was where they actually sought out the worst of the worst, the ones that had the most need and were at the most at the very bottom. And so, uh, a lot of the success in the beginning was exactly this: the ones that were committed to asylums and hospitals and were essentially given up on. One of the things that they do talk about here is that other disorders that may complicate the chance for recovery, and that certainly isn't something we decide. It's something that they're asking for professional advice and opinion from either a doctor or psychiatrist to give you that information, because there may be other underlying ailments that cause this to be more difficult at the very least to actually accomplish. But it's something to think about. Obviously, if somebody is being violent and is not in their right mind, I would say it's probably not a good case for you to take on with regard to trying to get them to recover, because obviously there's other things that they have to deal with as well. So, but there is a good chance that some of these folks at their rock bottom, and I mean the very bottom, that they can in fact find themselves finally enough is enough, and it's time to pick themselves up and start climbing out of the hole that they've dug so deep for themselves. Rod?
Yeah, here's a promise. The power of God goes deep. So I just want to skip over to page 50 for a second. Okay. And in the middle of the page, on one proposition, however, these men and women are strikingly agreed. Every one of them has gained access to and believes in a power greater than himself. This power has in each case accomplished the miraculous, the humanly impossible. As the celebrated American statesman put it, let's look at the record. That statesman was Al Smith, but we won't go into him. But, and that's what it's all about, is that we find this power. Now, it's also talking about here that other people have other problems and that they need psychiatrists or doctors to deal with them. And remember, if they need other help, that's what the good doctors are here for. Okay, a lot of people come in with depression, and other issues. Go see a doctor. These men have given their lives to help us, so let them. You may have the reverse situation on your hands. Perhaps you have a husband who is at large, but who should be committed. Some men cannot or will not get over alcoholism. When they become too dangerous, we think the kind thing is to lock them up. But of course, a good doctor should always be consulted. The wives and children of such men suffer horribly, but not more than the men themselves.
Yeah, it's obviously you've got a belligerent denier, somebody that is not going to go peacefully, and is showing signs of violence and resistance. That is something that you want to be aware of. And yes, the wives and children suffer horribly because they want so badly for their father or husband to be normal and recovered, but obviously alcohol has got them clamped up, and it's not a good thing. So, Rob?
Yeah, I know Leo touched on something before, is that, Bill would go to Towns Hospital and pick out the worst drunks that were in there to try to help sober them up. Now, he was getting this information from Dr. Silkworth. Dr. Silkworth would find somebody that he would think that the spiritual solution would work with. And he would contact Bill. Bill would show up at the hospital, or Hank, or Fitz, and they would go to the hospital to work with these people. You know, Also, don't forget Bill's story. When he was in resentment or self pity, what did he do? He went to the hospital to go and check on other people to see if he could get out of his own mind. So we're at near the bottom of page 114. But sometimes you must start life anew. We know women who have done it. If such women adopt a spiritual way of life, the road will be smoother. If your husband is a drinker, you probably worry over what other people are thinking, and you hate to meet your friends. You draw more and more into yourself, and you think everyone is talking about conditions at your home. You avoid the subject of drinking, even with your own parents. You do not know what to tell the children. When your husband is bad, you become a trembling recluse, wishing the telephone had never been invented.
Yeah, it's really tough. This is one of those, isolation, withdrawal, and trying to hide the fact that you've got this ugly problem that is part of the family. You second guess a lot of things. Did you marry the right or wrong person? Are the children safe? And do you not want to let other people know of what's going on and the problems that come with it? Um, and you withdraw. It's a classic case of withdrawal. And bottom line is, it's just it's bad. It's bad. Right?
Yeah, but sometimes you have to start life anew.
Yep.
We know women who have done it. If such women adopt the spiritual way of life, the road will be much smoother, which is a promise right there. Except the spiritual life. Okay, we're on page 115, everybody. We find that most of this embarrassment is unnecessary. Well, you need not discuss your husband at length. You can quietly let your friends know the nature of his illness. But you must be on guard not to embarrass or harm your husband. When you have carefully explained to such people that he is a sick person, you have created a new atmosphere. Barriers which have sprung up between you and your friends will disappear with the growth of sympathetic understanding. You will no longer be self conscious or feel that you must apologize as though your husband were a weak character. It may be anything but that. Your new courage, good nature, and lack of self consciousness will do wonders for you socially.
This is one path that you could end up going, and I know that the hardest part is probably admitting to another person that there is a problem with either the husband or the wife, spouse, which partner, etc. And yes, I have actually seen where my admission that I'm an alcoholic, or that I just don't drink because it doesn't agree with me. Just statements like that seem to put people at ease with regard to why I'm not drinking essentially with them. All right. And if it's, my wife, actually, with my permission, it's not so much that she didn't actually need my permission, but I certainly wanted to make sure it was okay, is that she has a number of people that she works with and deals with, and so there are people that have had some problems on their own with other people in their lives, and my wife has been very quick to acknowledge that we've had this problem, and that I am no longer drinking, but I'm a recovered alcoholic. But what's nice about it is that she's comfortable enough to talk about it. It does break down barriers. It doesn't feel so much like there's this hiding of a secret or this bad thing that's going on. And I would just say that neither her nor I needs to feel like that we have to apologize for anything. And at this point, there isn't anything to apologize for because I've recovered. I'm not, if I stumble and make a comment that is off color or something like that, that's not because of the alcohol. It's just me being, um, unwise and part of the human condition and just making a mistake. But it's certainly apologize for that. I don't feel like I have a weak character because I don't drink anymore. I just don't drink anymore, and I'm fine with that, as well as I know a number of you are as well, in regards to yourselves, and that's the good thing. And I have no problems letting people know. It's not. I've gotten very comfortable with it. It's the sobriety and the recovery has matured to a point that I'm just in that category of a non-drinker. There are a lot of people out there that just don't drink, and I'm a part of that. I got there in a different way, but I am a part of that. Rob?
Thank God you got it, Leo.
Yeah, thanks.
I just wonder what the tone and the context of this Two Wives would be if Anne or Lois had written it. Now, and that's one of the things that get me is that, Bill wrote this chapter. We all know it. Okay. In Dr. Bob and the Good Old Timers book, it was said that Bill offered Anne, Dr. Bob's wife, to write this chapter. Okay, then in writing the big book, they say, no, Bill never offered it to Anne. He did offer Anne to write a story at the back of the book, but not Two Wives. And Lois was quite upset that she wasn't given the opportunity to write this because she is the wife who dealt with all this. So it would be interesting to know if she had written it and Bill had dismissed it. That would be one thing. At least we could find that and read it, see what the difference would be. Because I think it would be quite different. I don't think the patience would be there. But then again, you know what? She stayed with him all through his alcoholism. So she must have been a saint to put up with all of Bill's antics. So, oh well. And what Bill is doing here is he's talked about pride, which was on page 114 at the bottom. Okay, we just read about friends. Okay, now we're going to talk about children. The same principle applies in dealing with the children. Unless they actually need protection from their father, it is best not to take sides in any argument he has with them while drinking. Use your energies to promote a better understanding all around. Then that terrible tension which grips the home of every problem drinker will be lessened.
Yeah, and we're going to get started here talking about the children, not taking sides. It's obviously you don't want to pit the kids against their father or mother, and at this point you want to try to stay as neutral as possible. But depending on their age, kids are receptive, they're smart, and if they're older and can understand better, it's just like you would explain it to somebody else. Just sit down and explain to what it is that's going on with the alcoholic, and they get it. If they're younger, it's just you just have to just temper it with something age appropriate, and I guess sometimes that's easier said than done, but nonetheless, the idea is to get them to understand that this is a disease, it's an ailment, it is something that is afflicting the individual, and that you're working towards a solution. Unfortunately, it's going to take a while, and there may be some ups and downs, because of it. Right?
And now we're going to go to the employer. Frequently, you have felt obliged to tell your husband's employer and his friends that he was sick, when as a matter of fact, he was tight. Avoid answering these inquiries as much as you can. Whenever possible, let your husband explain. Your desire to protect him should not cause you to lie to people when they have a right to know where he is and what he is doing. Discuss this with him when he is sober and in good spirits. Ask him what you should do if he places you in such a position again, but be careful not to be resentful about the last time he did so.
Well, putting the person, that is afflicted on the spot, in the sense of having to explain this to an employer, obviously they're just trying to get it so that you're not enabling the alcoholic by covering for him or her, and And I think that's important. I think that, certainly the individual has to feel some level of responsibility. They have to feel some of the impact that is happening because they're either going to be late for work or they're going to miss a day of work because of being hungover or still drunk. And but at the same time, just don't let the resentment creep in, and because that's just going to start causing problems again between the two of you. Um, but nonetheless, I think it's important that the alcoholic be involved in their explanations to the employer as to what's going on. Well,
Yeah, I love how it does, be careful not to be resentful about the last time you did so. Try not to be resentful at your husband or your wife for putting you in a position where you have to lie all the time. Don't be resentful. Okay. We have tools to deal with that now. We have as alcoholics. Do these poor spouses have that tool? We have the sick man prayer. This is a sick man. How can I best be helpful to them? Okay. So that's how we deal with resentment. Okay. How do they deal with resentment? Page 116, everybody. There is another paralyzing fear. You may be afraid your husband will lose his position. You are thinking of the disgrace and hard times which would befall you and the children. This experience may come to you, or you may already have had it several times. Should it happen again, regard it in a different light. Maybe it will prove a blessing. It may convince your husband he wants to stop drinking forever. And now you know that he can stop if he will. Time after time, this apparent calamity has been a boon to us, for it opened up a path which led to the discovery of God.
yeah, the idea here is that they've lost something, and when they've lost something big, especially the ability to revenue coming into the home and being able to pay bills and do groceries, etc. When there's a major blow like that, it sometimes is enough to put the person into a frame of mind that they are willing to, they're now at the point that they are willing and ready to go down the path of recovery. And that's really what they want to talk about here, is that this may end up being a blessing because they may be that wake-up call that we're looking for that's going to finally sink in and make a difference. And I, before I give it back over to Rob for a couple of seconds here, I do want to say that I started highlighting time after time is where I started highlighting, and I highlight all the way over to 117. The next few paragraphs are pretty pivotal and ones that we want to really focus on. But Rob?
Yeah, it says here, time after time, this apparent calamity has been a boon to us, for it opened up a path which led to discovery of God. Let's go to page 25 for a second. Why has it opened up a boon? There is a solution. Almost none of us like the self-searching, the leveling of our pride, the confession of shortcomings which led to the process required for its successful consummation. But we saw that it really worked in others, and we had come to believe in the hopelessness and futility of life as we had been living it. When therefore we were approached by those in whom the problem had been solved, there was nothing left for us but to pick up the simple kit of spiritual tools laid at our feet. There is a solution. So, page 116, everybody. We have elsewhere remarked how much better life is when lived on a spiritual plane. If God can solve the age-old riddle of alcoholism, he can solve your problems too. We wise found that, like everybody else, we were afflicted with pride, self-pity, vanity, and all the things which go to make up the self-centered person. And we were not above selfishness or dishonesty. As our husbands began to apply spiritual principles in their lives, we began to see the desirability of doing so too.
Yeah, so we're moving into some success here. Recovery is apparent, and a spiritual life, a spiritual plane, is certainly the path that they're going down, and that in and of itself is giving you the power that you need in order to not only overcome the drinking problem and recover, but also apply it to other areas of your life. And what we're basically seeing now is that if the alcoholic is beginning to live their life under spiritual principles, then perhaps the other person can as well, and then that would just permeate through the family, and the rest of the family could come along and start to see some of the other successes that come with living a spiritual life. Rob?
At first, some of us did not believe we needed this help. We thought on the whole we were pretty good women, capable of being nicer if our husband stopped drinking. But it was a silly idea that we were too good to need God. Now we try to put spiritual principles to work in every department of our lives. When we do that, we find it solves our problems too. The ensuing lack of fear, worry, and hurt feelings is a wonderful thing. We urge you to try our program, for nothing will be so helpful to your husband as to radically change attitude towards him, which God will show you how to have. Go along with your husband if you possibly can.
Yeah, and again, we're transitioning through. The alcoholic has found a higher power and is using that strength now to recover and start to live their life under those principles. And if that works for them, then at the same time, perhaps you could follow along. You know, it's not without saying and going that my wife, followed along with me. And I mean, in one instance, I would say that she just decided to stop drinking on behalf of me, and did it like that, without any issues or any challenges or anything. But that support is where I'm kind of going with, and that is that there is some strength that I gained because of the fact that I wasn't faced with a person in my life that was, decided to keep drinking normally, but keep drinking nonetheless, and tempt me, especially in the early stages of my recovery, and it has just continued on. So it's not unlike that to say, also from a spiritual standpoint, you hold on to that higher power, and if you see the success that the alcoholic is having with it, then you embracing that higher power, you can find that it can be beneficial to you as well. And that's what Bill is trying to show here is that it not only is successful for the alcoholic, but can be for the entire family. And in doing so, you benefit the alcoholic even more so, but the family also reaps the benefit from everyone being on a spiritual plane.
Yeah, I love here. We urge you to try our program, for nothing will be so helpful to your husband as to radically change attitude towards him, which God will show you how to have. Remember in the big book, it talked about casting old ideas to the side. New ideas, thoughts, and emotions now take over. Okay? And it's the idea, Al-Anon was created on this whole idea of, letting your husband do what he's going to do, detach, they're going to do what they're going to do. You have no control over it. No control over it. Remember, we were selfish and self-centered, so we had to come up with a change in the way we looked at things. We thought we were God. Well, we realized we're not God. Now we're doing what God wants us to do. Okay? So instead of playing God, we let God decide for us what's going to happen. So new ideas, old ideas are cast aside. New ideas come in. God, what would you have me be? Thy will, not my will, be done. If you and your husband find a solution for the pressing problem of drink, you are, of course, going to be very happy. But all problems will not be solved at once. Seed has begun to sprout in a new soil, but growth has only begun. In spite of your newfound happiness, there will be ups and downs. Many of the old problems will still be with you. This is as it should be.
Sure, and it's just basically saying that life is still going to be the trials and tribulations that we face on a daily basis. That doesn't necessarily mean that everything is going to be solved all at once. Like, me as an alcoholic, after 2 weeks of sobriety, wanted everything to be solved and everything to be done and everything to be happy. It just wasn't going to be, and it took me a while to finally realize that. But at the same time, they're basically saying that there's going to be, growth. There's going to be things that are positive, but there's still going to be some stuff that's on the negative side, or that is going to still have to be worked out. It's not just the other person in the family that is got to be convinced of the recovery and sobriety, but there may be employers, family, friends, etc., that also have to be convinced, and that's going to take some time. So those problems are going to still be there, in addition to the fact that just the normal day-to-day, human interaction issues and challenges that you have with relationships are always going to be there. And, now, if you live your life on a spiritual basis and really kind of work through that, some of those problems will either be lessened or go away, but also that just takes some time in order for that to be realized as well. But nonetheless, there are going to still be things of life that will happen all around you. Rob?
Yeah, seed is started to sprout in a new soil, which is the soil is willingness, but growth has only begun. In spite of your newfound happiness, there will be ups and downs. Many of the old problems will still be with you. This is as it should be. Now, a couple of things I want to mention here. Yesterday in Bill's meeting, he mentioned maintenance and growth. If you don't maintain the garden, no new growth will happen. The weeds will take over and choke anything that's trying to grow. So we have to maintain the garden in order for new growth to happen. Okay, so how do we get that to happen? Page 14 of Bill's story. Where an alcoholic failed to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life through work and self-sacrifice for others, he could not survive the certain trials and low spots ahead. Okay? If he did not work, he would surely drink again, and if he drank, he would surely die. Then faith would be dead indeed. With us, it's just like that. Okay? A little further on the page, it talks about Bill, and when he was feeling depressed and full of self-pity, he would go to the hospital to help somebody else, get him out of his own head. Okay? Instead of thinking about himself all the time, he's thinking of others. Remember, before, what gave us ease and comfort? Okay, when we were feeling good, bad, and different, okay, we would have a few drinks, but then the allergy would kick in and we couldn't control the amount. Now what do? We ask God, what should I do in this situation? Okay, and we go and help somebody else. Okay, so page 117. The faith and sincerity of both you and your husband will be put to the test. These workouts should be regarded as part of your education, for thus you will be learning to live. You will make mistakes, but if you are in earnest, they will not drag you down. Instead, you will capitalize them. A better way of life will emerge when they are overcome.
Yeah, and I've written in a note here that this is really something that can be applied to a step 11, where you basically review your day and what was could have been done better in the evening, and then in the next morning, asking your higher power for guidance as to how to live your life a little bit better. So applying a step 11 in this situation is certainly one that I feel like is part of the workout, and part of the education that you're trying to learn, and thus, as it says, to live. And so, mistakes are going to be made. So how do you deal with those? You look at what you could have done better that night, and then the next day you look at how you can be a better person the next day, and perhaps even exercising a step 10 in the immediacy of a problem, and essentially trying to make amends for something that is done at that point. But again, this is a workout. It is just like anything. You start small and then graduate to either more repetitions, more weight, et cetera, with regard to exercise. The same thing holds true here. It's a crawl, walk, run kind of approach, and you kind of learn as you go along. But as you learn, things are going to get better and better. Yeah.
You will make mistakes, it says here. Okay. And we do. We are not perfect. Okay. Spiritual. Okay. We are trying to practice spiritual progress, not spiritual perfection. Okay. We are going to make mistakes. That's why they put in step 10 and step 11. Step 10 is that safety net, as a friend of mine, Art, always said. You know, that when we make a mistake, what do? Do we sweep it under the rug? No, we deal with it. When do we deal with it? Now. Yeah, as my friend Katie always says, now. Okay, we deal with it. Okay, if I upset Allie, okay, unintentionally, I'm going to realize that, you know what, oh, I said something that, upset Allie. I didn't mean to. Okay, but he doesn't know that. So I go to Allie and I go, Allie, you know what? I'm so sorry. I didn't mean it that way. Okay, I deal with it now. I don't just let it go so that Allie now, every time I see Allie, I'm avoiding him. Okay, I deal with it. Okay, whenever we make mistakes, now these are the spiritual tools that we've learned, is that we trust God, infinite God, rather than finite self. Okay, because God is going to protect me, and if I do His work well, okay, I have work to do. I don't just sit on my rear end and expect everything to be taken care of for me. I have work to do. We have a power line that comes into the house. But if I don't get up off my chair and flick the light switch, the lights are not going to come on. I have work to do. God's work. Okay, page 117, everybody. Some of the snags you will encounter are irritation, hurt feelings, and resentments. Your husband will sometimes be unreasonable, and you will want to criticize. Starting from a speck on the domestic horizon, great thunderclouds of dispute may gather. These family dissensions are very dangerous, especially to your husband. Often you must carry the burden of avoiding them or keeping them under control. Never forget that resentment is a deadly hazard to an alcoholic. We do not mean that you have to disagree with your husband whenever there is an honest difference of opinion. Just be careful not to disagree in a resentful or critical spirit.
Yeah, this is a really tough place to be, especially when you have the reaction that you may want to have is one of retaliation or going into a defensive mode. It's that pause that you want to take and to think about how best to respond. Maybe it is to disagree, but do it in a polite and easy manner, as opposed to a hard, you know, pounding of a table, type of approach. Yeah, doesn't mean that it's right and you should allow this other person to walk all over you in order to get there. And that's what they're trying to say here. Is do your best to handle the situation in an appropriate manner. Do your best not to do it in an inappropriate manner, because that, as they say, starting from a speck on the domestic horizon, great thunderclouds of dispute may gather, and you can quickly see how things can spiral out of control and things get really bad. It's going to be a tough road. It's one that you have to be prepared for. You have to think about. You have to make sure that you take those moments to pause and think about how best to approach this type of thing, and hopefully you can maneuver it without too much consternation. A part of what they're trying to say here too is that if it gets to be too bad, then the alcoholic could do the all heckets and just decide that they're going to start drinking again because it's not working. That's the worst case scenario. This is where you want to try and maneuver things in such a positive way that you avoid that, and hopefully that you can, because of the fact that these dissensions can be very dangerous, especially to the alcoholic. And that's what they're trying to say here. Bob?
Yeah. And don't forget that on page 64, it says resentment is the number one offender. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else. But not just alcoholics suffer from resentment. Okay, non-alcoholics suffer from resentments too.
Yep.
And that cuts them off from God too. So that's why we don't want resentments to build up, because it's blocks that block us off from God. Okay. So top of page 118, everybody. You and your husband will find that you can dispose of serious problems easier than you can the trivial one. Next time you and he have a heated discussion, no matter what the subject, it should be the privilege of each to smile and say, things are getting serious. I'm sorry I got disturbed. Let's talk about it later. If your husband is trying to live on a spiritual basis, he will also be doing everything in his power to avoid disagreement or contention.
Yeah. So here's one of the things that I think is important to note. If the alcoholic is living on a spiritual basis and applying those principles, then this scenario should be a relatively easy thing to maneuver, and one that would be a much easier situation if they're not, or if they say they are, but they really aren't living by spiritual means. Then this is going to be a very difficult path. And I think that there's a good kind of litmus test that is kind of being uncovered here. And that is that, you can dispose of these serious problems much easier if both of you are living on a spiritual principled life. And if you're not, well, then you can see where things are going to spiral out of control. The pause isn't there. The higher power is not being tapped into, et cetera, et cetera. And you have a problem. But if you are, and they are, then you should be able to do this fairly. I say fairly. How about just relatively easier than if you're not? Rob?
I love this line. This is getting serious. I'm sorry I got disturbed. Let's talk about it later. Now, this is something that has to be talked about before it gets to this point. You and your spouse have to sit down, or your significant other have to be able to have sat down beforehand and said, you know what, if something, if we start talking and, either one of us get disturbed or gets to the point where they're getting really frustrated, we have the ability to pause and to come back to this later on so we can cool off, because we don't want to say or do anything to upset the other person where we'll have to make an amends later on. Okay, this is a two-way street. It's good for the goose and it's good for the gander. We both have to come to this. This is the pause. This is where we say, look, let me come back to this. Okay, we pause. Pray and use step 11 as the acronym that I put into the chat. I love the pause. And I try to remind myself every morning and every night to always use it. So I try not to forget it. But in the heat of a moment, our instincts take over. Okay. So, and this is what we're trying not to do. We're not trying to let our instincts take over, but we are God conscious. Okay. Let God take over instead of Rob. Okay? Your husband knows he owes you more than sobriety. He wants to make good, yet you must not expect too much. His ways of thinking and doing are habits of years. Patience, tolerance, understanding, and love are the watchwords. Show him these things in yourself, and they will be reflected back to you from him. Live and let live is a rule. If you both show a willingness to remedy your own defects, there will be little need to criticize each other.
Yeah. What a great paragraph, and one that is should be highlighted and underlined. And that is that one, the alcoholic owes everyone more than just not drinking. This is just the not drinking is just one element of recovery, but at the same time, it's going to take time, and part of that is on the responsibility of the alcoholic, and part of it is on the responsibility of others to allow the alcoholic to actually recover and not hold up any hard feelings for forever. They may go on for months, they may go on for a few years, but over time, these should melt away. With patience, tolerance, understanding, and love are watchwords, absolutely. the more you can tap into those feelings and those emotions, the better off the entire relationship is going to be. And it's always, if you give what you want to get back, and so you get back what you give, I guess is the best way to put it. So the more that you show that love and tolerance, the more you likely you're going to get that back. And so this is just a good way to just think about, if you were to read a paragraph in the morning and think in terms of what you might do. This paragraph is one that you might add in to some of your readings, and follow it. And you'll find that things are going to be better. They take time, but they'll be better. Rob?
Yeah, his ways of thinking and doing are the habits of years. Instinct. My natural instinct is to do this. Well, now today I have to pause and say, God, what would you have me do in this situation? Okay, I have to actually stop, because my natural instinct is to do, lying is so much easier to do than telling the truth at times. But, nowadays it's, well, tell the truth. It's not a big deal, but it's just that, lies came so easy, and it was my first instinct. Live and let live is the rule. This is one of my favorite, and I tell myself this constantly during the day. Patience, tolerance, understanding, and love. And I've added, and goodwill to all. The reason I say that is that I used to get into the car and think that every other car out on the road was out to get me, to cut me off, to get in my way, to slow me down, to do all these things. They're not. Everybody has got their own agenda, their own things going on in their life. I am not the center of the world. The world does not revolve around me. Okay? But I used to think it was. So now it's a question of, they're not out to get me. Patience, tolerance, understanding, love, and goodwill towards all. Okay? My job now is to fit myself to be of maximum service to God and the people around me. How can I best serve them? How can I bring value to other people's lives each and every day? I don't have to do big, huge things. It's a small thing, a smile, open the door for somebody, let somebody in front of me in line. Okay, yeah, I might be a minute later than I would, but you know what? It's not a big deal. It's kindness and courtesy for others, thinking of others before ourselves. These are things that we are trying to do now. Why? Because that's what God wants us to do, to help others. Okay? We don't know what other people are going through. They might be miserable and grumpy because they got a sick wife, a sick child, a sick parent. We don't know what other people are going through. So we have to give people the benefit of the doubt that they're not after me. They're going through something, okay, that I know nothing about. Okay? That's why I pause and have patience, tolerance, understanding, and love and goodwill towards all. If we can do that, the world is a better place. We women carry with us a picture of the ideal man, the sort of chap who would like our husbands to be. It is the most natural thing in the world. Once his liquor problem is solved, to feel that he will now measure up to that cherished vision. The chances are he will not, for, like yourself, he's just beginning his development. Be patient.
Yeah, be patient, take some time, and realize that this isn't going to be the perfect person in any time, any short order. In fact, you probably never be the perfect person, but certainly on the path to recovery also is the path to being a better sort of chap that you would like to have as a husband, and or in other cases a wife or a partner. It is the most natural thing. Yep, we all want something that there's always something that we feel like that could improve, but at the same time you have to look at what you've got, realize that it is good. A sober and recovering alcoholic is on the path of much goodness, and it's going to take again some time, and in order to get there, you must be patient. It's really just a great way of saying just be patient. Rob?
Yeah, it says right here, the last line I read was be patient. That's one thing we alcoholics are not very good at, patience. Okay, we want everything now. We want instant gratification. You know what? In this world that we live in, we have cell phones that give us, it's a computer that we get, when we are stumped, we go to the computer. Okay, how can I find this address? Okay, and we got maps to show us directly how to get there. You know, life isn't necessarily like that. Okay? Time takes time. How much how much time will it take? Well, it's not like a street, where you can say, well, it's supposed to take 15 minutes, but traffic's a little heavy, so it might take 18 minutes. You know, we have to practice these principles in all our affairs. Okay. We pray, we don't always see the results right away. Okay. So a lot of people don't want to pray because they don't see any results. Keep practicing until you can see results that are happening in your life. See, and this is the hardest thing. Time takes time. Okay? Keep on the road of happy destiny, not to happy destiny, of happy destiny. We're on that road. Enjoy the ride. Another feeling we are very likely to entertain is one of resentment. That love and loyalty could not cure our husbands of alcoholism. We do not like the thought that the contents of a book or the work of another alcoholic has accomplished in a few weeks that for which we struggled for years. At such moments, we forget that alcoholism is an illness over which we could not possibly have had any power. Your husband will be the first to say it was your devotion and care which brought him to the point where he could have a spiritual experience. Without you, he would have gone to pieces long ago. When resentful thoughts come, try to pause and count your blessings. After all, your family is reunited. Alcohol is no longer a problem, and you and your husband are working together toward an undreamed of future.
Yeah. So I use this, I would say that this is, without my wife, I would have gone to pieces. I think that I would have, on my own, by myself, found myself easily able to drink alone and then constantly be there without the encouragement, sometimes the direction, if you will, to watch my drinking, stop drinking. You need to stop drinking, and just the constant reminder that I have a problem, which at first I was resentful for, but then found that it was just that she cared an awful lot and was doing it out of love and loyalty. It got me to the point that I was able to, start my path on recovery. And in doing so, with the continued support that she provided, is also one that helped as well. So, it's not so much that love and loyalty didn't get me recovered. That alone didn't do that, but it certainly did provide the path, if I could say it that way, for recovery. And then the book, as well as the Keystone Group and some of the folks that are associated with that group, were able to bluntly get me into a state of mind where I could find myself really focusing on my getting my higher power and tapping into that inner strength. And that's what it really took in order for me to get to this, to find that. And I had to have those elements as part of that. My wife and her love and loyalty, the book, as well as the folks in the Keystone Group, and there I was able to open the door to recovery and walk through it, and then all things were good, or they get better anyway. Now, it's easy to sit back and think that you are the one that has endured all of this for so many years. You're the one that has stood by them for so many years, and that you have done everything that you know to do, and it hasn't worked. And then all of a sudden, the resentment of a book and another person that's an alcoholic that can do this, you really have to be careful of that pitfall, and not get yourself mired in that resentment, because that could undermine the recovery. And you could find that the opposite being true, and the person who was trying to recover may not. Rob?
Yeah, well, it is 12:57. Let's bring Mr. Bill into it, please.
Hey, hi, this is Bill, alcoholic from New Jersey. Thanks a lot for the meeting today, guys. Good job here. This here chapter, 2 wives. Remember, it's 2 wives, not 4 wives. This was written by Bill, and it was not written for the wives to be able to get better. This was written to the wives so they would know how to deal with an alcoholic and help the alcoholic stay sober. Remember, the main purpose of this book, in the forward to the first edition, is to show other alcoholics precisely how we have recovered. That's the purpose of the book, to keep alcoholics sober. So sometimes he says things in here that sounds like he's picking on the wives or telling the wives they're supposed to take it and put up with all kinds of stuff. Remember, the purpose of the book is to keep an alcoholic sober, not to help a wife get better. We're not Al-Anon. We're Alcoholics Anonymous. And he talks in here about don't embarrass your husband. That's a spiritual principle. We're supposed to be considerate of other people, not inconsiderate. Whether it's the wife or the alcoholic, we're not supposed to embarrass people. If you embarrass an alcoholic, they might get drunk over that. It also talks about we're going to make mistakes. That's where we use step 10. Step 10 says that as we go along, we set right any new mistakes. That's what we're supposed to do. So he's giving us some indication here on for the wife, or the alcoholic can use it also. We're supposed to constantly use step 10. Every time some kind of a mistake comes up, we're supposed to set it right as quickly as we can. And he talks in here about don't be resentful. And the last thing we read was about resentments, and we're not supposed to, the spouse of the alcoholic is not supposed to be resentful about the alcoholic, because resentments are contagious. And if the spouse gets resentful and then the alcoholic gets resentful, more likely than not, the alcoholic is going to wind up drinking again. And again, this is about trying to help the alcoholic stay sober. So basically what he's saying with this resentment stuff is a smart person knows how to fix a resentment. A wise person knows how to avoid a resentment. And that's basically the instructions or the suggestions he's giving here. Try to avoid that kind of stuff. It's better to pause and walk away and deal with it later. And most people don't pause because nobody wants to do that. Everybody wants to get in each other's face. But realistically, when you're dealing with an alcoholic or with a family member of an alcoholic, pause is the best thing to do. Sit back, relax, and, get up and leave. Go to the bathroom. Do something. Lock yourself in the bathroom. Say, I'll be back in 10 minutes, whatever. Give everybody time to cool off. It just works better that way. All right, that's all I got. Thanks for letting me share.
Thanks, Bill.
All right, Rob, let's close out with the surrender prayer. And then
You got it, brother. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference.